Good afternoon. I am Rochelle Bowerman. I work for the Michigan Department of Education in the Office of Educational Supports. And we thank you for joining us. We're going to be talking about personal curriculum and modifications specific to students with IEPs today. And I'm going to let my fantastic colleague Nancy introduce herself.
Thank you, Rochelle. I am Nancy Rotarius, State Policy Coordinator for the Office of Special Ed, and I will also be presenting on this webinar.
It is always important to start the personal curriculum or PC conversation by laying a solid foundation. The foundation starts with the Michigan Merit Curriculum or MMC credit requirements. The PC is a flexibility option that lies within the MMC. It is critical that districts understand the graduation requirements and how students earn credit before removing credits with a personal curriculum. The Michigan Merit Curriculum is built on the idea that credits are granted solely based on proficiency or mastery of content standards. The MMC graduation requirements were meant to do away with a system that values time and course titles, shifting the focus to student learning and proficiency. All 18 credits of the MMC are based on students mastering content, proving proficiency through assessment, and then being granted credit. The document shown lists all 18 credits required for a diploma and how students can earn those credits. You will notice that there is no mention of course names or time constraints. It is not 4 years of math or 3 years of science. It is credits based on proficiency of content as determined by a district. A student could earn all 3 science credits, for example, in 3 months or 3 years. When they have mastered all of the required science content, that is when the district should grant the 3 science credits. The website linked on the slide will take you to the high school page where you can read in depth about the MMC and the adopted Michigan content standards. I have blown up the credit requirements from the MMC one-pager. This section highlights the focus on student learning of content and not courses or time. As one more example, let's talk about English Language Arts or ELA. The requirement for ELA in Michigan is 4 credits, not specifically 4 years. The requirement is also not ELA 9 or ELA 10, which are examples of traditional courses. These 4 credits should be granted to students once they have demonstrated that they have mastery over all the high school ELA standards. A student could learn these standards in traditional courses or various other ways, but once they are able to demonstrate the learning, the district must grant them credit. All MMC credits are fundamentally the same. When a student proves content knowledge, they should be granted the aligned credit. In Michigan, districts have the autonomy over many aspects of the MMC, including curriculum, grading, proficiency assessments, and the granting of credits. Once the MMC law was passed and the content standards were adopted, the implementation of the MMC rests with local districts and school boards across the state. Another facet of the MMC legislation is the testing out provision. The testing out rule states that any student can test out of any MMC requirement by showing understanding or mastery of the content standards. The intent is to allow students to earn credit without taking a specific class as long as they can show content mastery. Districts are required to have assessments available for students if they request to test out of any of the 18 required credits. A common way that districts accomplish this is by using a summative end-of-course final exam. If a student earns a C+ or better on a cumulative standards-based assessment, then the district must grant that credit. If you check out the high school page from a few slides ago, there is a testing out FAQ where you can learn more about the testing out option. In addition to the MMC credit requirements, all students in Michigan are also required to complete an Educational Development Plan, or EDP, with support from school advisors during their middle school years. Students should be provided the opportunity to develop an EDP in 7th grade and review the EDP in 8th grade and every subsequent year until graduation. The primary emphasis of the EDP is to develop a student's statement of career goals and a plan of action for reaching those goals. The EDP is one component of the Michigan Career Development Model, which assists districts in providing career and college readiness activities for students K-12. The EDP should assist students in creating a plan and assist districts in providing the necessary courses and experiences for students to meet their post-school goals.
Thanks, Rochelle. We have discussed the requirements for the Michigan Merit Curriculum and the Educational Development Plan, which applies to all students. Now we will specifically look at the supports available to students who are eligible for special education and how those supports help students with IEPs. The federal law, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, focuses on 6 principles for students with disabilities: free appropriate public education, or FAPE, least restrictive environment, or LRE, appropriate evaluation, individual education program, parent participation, and procedural safeguards. Today, we will be highlighting the principle of an individualized education program. Specifically, we will look at the IEP and how this supports students with post-secondary goals. For a student with an IEP, a transition plan is developed as part of the IEP for the first IEP to be in effect when a student turns 16 or younger if determined appropriate by the IEP team. The transition plan assists students with an IEP in facilitating movement from school to post-secondary activities, including post-secondary education, training, and employment. When the purpose of the IEP team meeting is the consideration of post-secondary goals and development of a transition plan, which includes identification of transition services needed for students to reach those goals, 300.321 of the IDA requires the IEP team to include the student, or when the student does not attend the IEP meeting, the district must take other steps to ensure the student's preferences and interests are considered. The parents of the student, unless the student has reached the age of majority and the parent no longer retains legal authority. A regular education teacher of the student, the special education provider, a representative of the public agency who is qualified to provide or supervise the provision of specially designed instruction, is knowledgeable of the general education curriculum, and has the authority to commit district resources. An individual who can interpret the instructional implications of evaluation results, and representatives of any participating agency likely to be responsible for providing or paying for transition services with the consent of the parents or the student has reached the age of majority. The transition plan must include measurable post-secondary goals based on age-appropriate transition assessments in the areas of education, training, employment, and independent living where appropriate. Post-secondary goals identify the student's long-term goals beyond school. When the IEP team is addressing secondary transition, the IEP team must include at least one annual goal supporting the transition services identified in the plan. Annual goals must be measurable and are included in all IEPs, whether transition is being discussed. Transition services means a coordinated set of activities for a child with a disability that is designed to be within a results-oriented process that is focused on improving the academic and functional achievement of a student with a disability to facilitate the student's movement from school to post-school activities, including post-secondary education, vocational education, integrated employment, including supported employment, continuing and adult education, adult services, independent living, or community participation. These services are based on the individual student's needs, taking into account the student's strengths, preferences, interests, and can include instruction, related services, community experiences, the development of employment and other post-school adult living objectives, and if appropriate, acquisition of daily living skills and the provision of a functional vocational evaluation. The transition plan also needs to identify the course of study needed to assist the student in reaching their goals. The National Technical Assistance Center on Transition defines a course of study as a multi-year description of coursework from the student's current to anticipated exit year needed to achieve the student's desired post-school goals. The process for developing the course of study should assist the student and their family in selecting courses which are meaningful and motivate the student to complete their education. A student's individualized course of study should be evaluated annually and may change over time. The course of study should address educational experiences, courses, work experiences, and transition services necessary to successfully complete their education. The course of study should focus on how the educational program can be planned and relate directly to student goals beyond secondary education, and how those courses are linked to post-secondary and IEP goals. Students with disabilities can receive a high school diploma with or without a personal curriculum upon meeting state and district graduation requirements. A regular high school diploma means the standard high school diploma awarded to the preponderance of students in the state that is fully aligned with state standards. A certificate of completion is a form of recognition for students who have completed a program or met a predefined set of skills, but who have not met the requirements of the Michigan Merit Curriculum. Districts may have different forms of recognition for students who did not participate or did not complete the MMC requirements. However, these are not substitutes for a high school diploma. Other terms used for a certificate of completion may include certificate of attendance, certificate of participation. When students do not earn a diploma, they may be entitled to services and supports if they continue to be eligible for special education. Often these services are available through a post-high school special education programming and focus on independent living skills and transitioning to the community. These services are usually offered through an intermediate school district or local school district, and in Michigan may be available until the students are 26 years of age. Now let's look at the connection between the EDP and the IEP. Both documents support students in planning in their future. The data gathered from the transition assessments and the EDP are used to develop measurable post-secondary goals in the areas of education, training, employment, and when appropriate, independent living skills. The link between the EDP and the IEP may be more clearly understood by thinking about universal elements of quality planning, including identification of student preferences, interests, strengths, and needs, with a core emphasis on determining a course of study. All three documents work together to support the student in becoming career, college, and life ready. The student's IEP must identify the course of study, the supplementary aids and services, and supports necessary to allow the student to progress within the credit requirements of the MMC. The IEP must first consider those use of supplementary aids and services, as well as specially designed instruction to ensure access to the MMC. The EDP identifies post-secondary goals and the actions necessary to fulfill those goals, including high school courses and experiences. The personal curriculum team will consider MMC modifications and develop a personal curriculum consistent with both the IEP and the EDP.
Thank you so much, Nancy. We can now continue the session by looking at the personal curriculum, or PC, and how it can be used specifically for students with IEPs. The personal curriculum is a tool that districts can use to waive Michigan Merit Curriculum standards and credit requirements when it makes sense for individual students. The personal curriculum should use a student's post-school plan to build a course of study that is relevant, engaging, and meaningful for the student. The PC supports this by removing content standards and credits from the Michigan Merit Curriculum that don't make sense for that one individual student. By removing standards and credits that are not relevant to a student, the district can then replace that time with something that better meets the student's needs. A simple example of using a personal curriculum could be as follows. A student with an IEP plans to attend a community college after high school graduation and work towards an associate's degree in culinary arts. The school district develops a PC that removes the 2-credit world language requirement, meaning that the student will not take courses where they will learn another language. The PC removes those 2 credits, meaning they will not show up on a student's transcript at all. The student instead will use that time to take other courses or experiences that will better meet their needs and better prepare them for completing their post-school goals. In this example, the world language credits were not required for admission to a community college or for earning an associate's degree. Therefore, the student would not miss the content and can use that time instead in various other ways. The personal curriculum is not just for students with IEPs. There are personal curriculum options for all students attending Michigan public high schools. Each PC type has its own rules and allowable modifications. For the purposes of this webinar, we will only be talking about the PC type that involves students with IEPs. Information on all personal curriculum types can be found on the high school page. Students with active IEPs are allowed modifications beyond what is allowed for all other students. In fact, students with IEPs are allowed modifications in any content area of the Michigan Merit Curriculum. This means that a district could remove any adopted content standards and any MMC credit for a student with an IEP. The abundance of flexibility here is often what causes hesitance around using the PC, since there are no black and white rules. Due to the nature of this PC type, districts should understand that there is a lot of responsibility that comes with making these decisions. The intent of the personal curriculum is to make minor modifications to the MMC, leaving the majority of the content expectations intact, ensuring that students are still career, college, and life ready when they are handed a diploma. If a district removes too much MMC content, there is the risk that the student will leave high school and enter adulthood without the necessary skills and knowledge to achieve their next goal. Ultimately, it is up to a local district to determine career, college, and life readiness and grant the diploma. The next 2 slides will delve into the process and procedure of personal curriculum implementation. This first slide will outline the legislative requirements, and the second slide will speak to best practice. The personal curriculum is driven by local control. Districts make every decision about granting credit and earning a diploma in Michigan. While the personal curriculum is a great option for districts to use when there is student need, it is always up to the district when and how they implement a PC. With that being said, there are a few legislative requirements that involve the personal curriculum. If a parent requests a PC, the district must develop one. This doesn't mean it will be approved, but it directs the district to begin the process. Before going into effect, the superintendent or their designee, along with the parent, must approve the personal curriculum modifications. If either the district or the parent do not approve the personal curriculum modifications, the PC cannot be implemented. The district must also include information about the personal curriculum on their website and provide it in writing to parents and students annually. The last legislative requirement involves the personal curriculum being a team-based process. The personal curriculum team must include at minimum a parent, the student, and a counselor or teacher. In addition, a school psychologist is recommended if the student has an IEP. As a district thinks about its local practices and procedures, there are several things that they should consider. While forms are not required or submitted at the state level, it makes sense for districts to keep a record of the PC modifications they have made. The best way to do this could include having PC request forms available to families and to adopt standard PC forms that would be used across the districts. Annually, as the IEP, transition plan, and EDP get updated, it should also become common practice to update the personal curriculum and make sure there is still alignment across all documents. If a student changes their post-school goal or post-school plans, it could impact PC modifications. As districts look to increase their personal curriculum use and/or improve their process, they should consider professional development for staff members who could be included on the PC team. If you are interested in learning more about PC implementation, please reach out to us using the contacts on the last slide.
On this slide, you will find resources about personal curriculum for both parents and educators. These resources include the MDE Personal Curriculum Implementation Guide, Personal Curriculum Parent and Educator Guide, Personal Curriculum Additional Resources Supplement to the Personal Curriculum Parent and Educator Guide, Focus on Algebra 2, Focus on Transfer Students, Focus on Students with an Individualized Education Plan, Focus on Enrichment, and Family Matters Personal Curriculum PC Fact Sheet. On this slide, we have provided resources for parents and educators regarding transition planning for students with IEPs. These resources include a Family Matters on Finishing High School Certificates of Completion, Coordinating Transition Services, and Post-Secondary Access Guidance on the Requirements under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act and the Rehabilitation Act from January 16, 2025. And the Family Matters Special Education Transition Planning Considerations for Students with Disabilities and Families Fact Sheet.
We hope you have found this presentation helpful. If you have questions about personal curriculum or the Michigan Merit Curriculum requirements, please contact Rochelle Bowerman at bowermanr1@michigan.gov. For special education questions, please contact the Office of Special Education Information Line at mde-ose@michigan.gov or 1-888-320-8384.